take it away. Thank y'all so much. I'm glad I got asked to do this, and I love that there's a full room. That's awesome. And I'm really glad that Carrie and I got to do this together. You know, I'm passionate about art, and artists are inevitably like the most interesting and smartest people that I know, and any opportunity I have to help support them in their careers, I try to do that. So we've had some conversations. We decided to do this collaboratively, so we've had some conversations leading up to this and put together some slides that we're going to walk through, but we hope that this will be a conversation with you, because we want to make sure that you're getting what you need out of it. As we heard, there's like a lot of different interests in the room, but we'll try to speak to a whole bunch of those.
Yeah, I work at the Carver Museum, which is an African American museum in East Austin.
Okay. We need a shot.
Oh, wow. Okay. I am really soft-spoken, so I will have to speak very loudly for you all to hear.
It's very loud,
yeah.
but I'm glad to hear it.
So I work at an African American museum in East Austin. All right, it's a museum that exhibits art, and it's a museum that also does historical exhibitions. So my challenge is always to sort of balance that. And then we're not just a museum, we're also a cultural institution. So you have to balance that. And it's not unlike what artists have to balance when they're thinking about where to apply and what to apply for, right? Am I fit for this? Am I not? You know, those are the kinds of considerations you have to make around intention and impact. So I'm excited to be in conversation with you all this evening about the proposal process.
So sometimes we might get asked to do things like Jury Petito's Prize, you know, helping give away money to artists is like one of my favorite things to do. I will always say yes to that. Residency programs, sometimes, you know, I might be looking at slides for that. The South by Southwest Art Program, I look at those kinds of things. The Contemporary Austin has a group program that's 6 years old, that's professional development and group critique and community building, and that's an application-based project. So I feel like I've looked at a lot of proposals and been on different committees, and those always work a little bit differently, but hopefully we can kind of break down some of the basic elements of those and share some best practices and a little bit of what it's like to be on the other side. So that's who we are. We're gonna talk about all kinds of stuff, different proposals.
Yeah.
Should we jump to who they are?
Yeah.
All right, so we heard a little bit of why people came, but we want to maybe take the temperature of the room with the flags.
Yeah. So, does everybody have a flag? Probably not. So, flag. Somebody need a flag?
Could they use their hand?
You could also use your hand. But
Yeah.
So
I think we're gonna rip.
we're gonna freestyle. Okay.
Let's start with like maybe writing notes.
Okay. Raise your flag if you feel like I am pretty good at writing an artist statement.
Comfortable with it.
Comfortable. Good. All right, if you feel neutral, hold it right here. If you feel like, nah, point it at the floor. Or stomp your feet.
All right, so we have a room full of writers.
Okay. Raise your flag if you have some experience and you're kind of comfortable writing a proposal. Raise your flag if you have absolutely no experience writing an artist proposal or your partner does it for you. Okay, good. Use your resources.
Raise your flag high if you are good and comfortable about writing budgets for your proposal. Way to go, one guy in the back.
Okay.
All right, we got a few over here. How about documenting your work?
There we go.
If you feel like you're confident and good at getting images of your work.
Raise your hand if you feel comfortable talking to curators and arts administrators. Right. It's a mixed bag around approachability. Okay. All right. Okay. Raise your hand if you have been paid more than $5,000 for a piece of artwork that you've created. Raise your hand if, when you're thinking about making your artwork, you're also thinking about paying yourself. Right. Raise your flag if you have ever submitted an unsolicited proposal to a museum or institution. Keep your flag raised if you got a response.
A positive or negative?
Any response.
Any response. Any response. Any response. All right. Positive response. All right. I want everybody to take note of that.
How many? That was 3.
3.
Which was like 50%.
Right. Okay.
Of a very small number. All right. Does that
Yeah, I
get a
think
feel
that's
of the waters that we're
good.
swimming in? Okay. So we were talking about types of proposals. So as Carrie mentioned, unsolicited proposals is one of them. That's, you know, a gallery that you have been following. There's no information that they are looking for artists, and you are sending them things. You know, a museum where you are looking for a show that may or may not take proposals, but you're sending them things.
And unsolicited could also mean that you were not invited to apply to something. Because some institutions, you need, you know, you have to submit a LOI and they'll say, yeah, you can apply or not, right? So there's kind of multiple rounds of application.
What's an LOI?
Letter of interest.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Sorry.
So the Contemporary of Austin, where I work, you know, the artists are invited to have an exhibition there. There's no proposal process for like shows in the galleries. Unsolicited proposals are received. They are periodically responded to. And I don't know of any exhibitions that have come to the museum through that route, for example. So if you're thinking about, it takes a lot of time to submit a proposal and pull together all the components of it. Your odds of that happening for an unsolicited proposal are small. It also means what you submit should be like your A+++ game. Like they didn't ask for it, so whatever you send in needs to be like really top notch and wow them.
I mean, I think for me, we've had a few unsolicited proposals that have eventually made it into the gallery, right? Small, some large. It's a little bit more frequent because we are a cultural center, right? But most of the exhibitions that end up at our museum have been selected by the curatorial team and staff. We are going to start doing an open call once a year for a survey show which is probably going to roll out in November. Shameless plug. But, right, that's about it. And so you have to think about all of the things that you're pulling on when you submit an unsolicited proposal. You know, 90% of the institutions that you might work with at this point in your career don't have MoMA staffing, right? They have a couple of people wearing a lot of hats, even if they're gracefully appearing to not be doing that, right? So for me, for unsolicited proposal to kind of catch my attention, I have to be unwilling to answer the 3 phones that are ringing at the same time, right? Swat off my boss, right? And maybe not take a lunch, right? Because I need to sit or eat my lunch at my desk because I'm like, what is this, right? Otherwise, it's gonna get flagged and I might look at it 2 or 3 weeks from now.
And unfortunately, that response is, if it's going to be that you don't get that opportunity, you're probably not going to get a lot of feedback about why it wasn't a good fit. Not because curatorial staff are terrible people, but because there isn't the bandwidth to really, you know, spend a lot of time with the proposal and give, you know, in a perfect world, I think there's the desire to say, you know, I think this is interesting and I'd like to see your work grow in this direction, and you seem to be like strong at this, and I don't see how these 2 pieces are fitting together, but there isn't necessarily the job doesn't allow for like starting and then really having a back and forth conversation in a respectful way.
Right.
That sucks, but that's
Yeah.
real.
Yeah, and I mean, I work at a cultural center too, so there isn't this sort of like glass ceiling around me, right? Like some of these larger, more moving institutions. So sometimes people do pull up on me at work, you know, with their stuff, you know. And I'm always
like walk in the door with art.
Yes.
Don't do that.
Yes. That happens, right? We're in Austin, keep it whatever. But that's a thing sometimes, right? And I'm not necessarily like, oh, never, I'm not gonna consider it. Part of me, and everybody's gonna respond to it differently. Some people are gonna be completely offended that you showed up. I'm not in that boat. Obviously don't advertise that I said this, but right, I'm not gonna be offended, and I'm gonna try and take at least a moment, right? Because we're also thinking about the reputation of our institutions, right? Just like you're thinking about the reputation as a art. So.
I mean, my very forthright response to that is because the art world is made up of a bunch of people. And it's literally like, you know, 2 people having a conversation and trying to connect over some ideas. And that is a pretty awkward situation to thrust upon someone. And I understand like all the reasons and why to try to like get a reaction, but ideally that happens like a little more organically, where it might be beginning a conversation in a social setting where, you know, you talk about your work a little bit, and then there's a back and forth and some questions and an invitation to maybe, can I send you some images or come see a show, and then see it in person, and that evolves in the way that you would like get to know somebody or make a friend, that it happens a little more organically.
That's the maneuver. That's the proper maneuver, right? So you show up to a public event hosted by that institution, right? You try and pull somebody aside and see what happens.
So another kind of proposal is the open call. And the reason I often will say yes to being on a jury for that is a way to like speed date a whole bunch of art where you get to just look, and then like sometimes I'll go through that process and I'll know that like maybe 1 person or 2 or 3 people are gonna get picked, but I'll come away with a list of like 10 people where it's like, oh, in the next few months, like I wanna go find a show with their art in it. I wanna go set up a studio visit. I'm gonna check out their website. I wanna meet that person. So that's a way to maybe organically begin those kind of conversations. So if you're thinking about, I have limited time, I don't know if a proposal is worth my time, sometimes you might look at who's on that jury. Do you just want them to see your art? You might not get the $15,000, or you might not get like the residency of the show, but it might be worth, you know, a $15 submission fee because you want those eyes on their work and maybe a way to begin a conversation. So that's a realistic goal.
Yeah, and I mean the big thing between unsolicited and open call is planned attention. That's it. Solicited. I put a B+ there, even though I think you should always bring your A game. But they're kind of telling you, hey, we want to date you, right? We like you. You know, can we do this again, right?
It's like yours to lose.
Right. So, you know, that's good. I think that's at that point, people are paying attention to other smaller things. They probably already like your work, right? They're now assessing how easy it's going to be to work with you, how organized you are, right? And that's going to have an impact on the scheduling of your exhibition and the way things are planned out, right? I feel like
Yeah, no, I think that's good.
keep it short.
You have more experience with public art.
Right. So I've sat on a number of art in public places panels. Before I got to Austin, I was also in New York. So I got to sort of listen to art commissioners debate about any number of public art programs and proposals. Interesting fact. Depending upon the kind of market you're in. I feel like Austin is very relaxed, right? Very relaxed, very laid back. But just to put in an example, I think it was 2010. Kara Walker applied for a public art commission.
Why is that not in Austin?
They have a little machine that tabulates whether or not you completed your application, and she got bumped.
Like knocked out of the application?
Knocked out of the application pool.
To what?
Like not eligible.
I mean,
What was
the
she
sunken
applying for?
space, like her application was never viewed by anybody
Because she didn't fill it out?
because, or whoever her gallery assistant was, didn't upload a document,
Okay.
right? So there are metrics in place, particularly with public art projects and processes, where you want to put your detail-oriented hat on if that's not a hat that you already have, right? Because you put all this time and energy and effort into applying for this public art commission, and you could be bumped on a technicality. And typically, the volume of applicants that are received for public art commissions, because the money is so nice, right, is high. So that's another thing you want to consider. I would say public art commission are typically going to be some of your most competitive application processes. But these are also the application processes that if you get them, you could become an artist that lives on public art commissions all over the country and possibly internationally, right? Because I think, I can't remember, but I think the average public art commission for like a sculptural piece, national average was like $40,000. And then obviously there are public art commissions that are millions of dollars, right? But that's the average piece. And I think there are some more specific things that people are looking for in terms of public art proposals. And one of those, I feel like there's a really big assessment period. Like, okay, we like this art, but can they pull it off? Most of the weight is gonna be right there, right? And they're gonna assess that not just in the narrative that you provide about your idea and what you're going to do, but your understanding of processes, materials, and all of the minutia that can add to sort of the installation and construction budget of that project, right? Because most public art commissions are what? Municipal funded. They don't want to go over budget, right? And they have to do 200 or 300 different things just to permit your work to get installed, right? So, yeah, I think briefly, and we'll get into that a little more. Oh, the last thing I do want to say about the public art commissions is that there's a panelist that may or may not be, there's a panel of people that may or may not be visible, right? So they may put the names out of the people that are going to be reviewing the work. But there's also typically art commissioners, community organizations, and stakeholders that are all going to be weighing in on those applications, right? I've been in a room for an AIPP project where a group of panelists, at that time I was not a panelist, I was just a community stakeholder, selected an artist, and the public art commissioner said, we will not accept that artist as part of the selection for equity reasons, right? So there are a lot more moving parts.
That makes that bullet of customizing your approach to your audience tricky.
Right.
But it's, you have saved your go-to application materials, and in a perfect world, you are regularly revisiting that and updating that and making sure that the way that you're writing about your work talks about what you're doing in the studio, in the most recent, 6 months or a year, the things that you're heading towards, that your images are up to date, that your CV is up to date. That's going to make it a lot more easy when it's time, if an opportunity comes up and surprises you, then you are like ready to jump on that. But make sure that you are not sending the same thing everywhere, that you are considering your audience and how that's going to read, and what kind of fit you might be, and customizing that a little bit. I jury things, and sometimes I see like application materials repeatedly, and I want to know, like, that's great and I like that 2 years ago. But, what are you doing right now, for example? Even if it's maybe not as resolved, it might be nice to know. It gives you a sense of how an artist is working. So, think about who's on the other side of that. Moving on?
Yeah.
We're going to go into each of these, but you are, for most proposals and most applications, you're going to have most of these, but not all of these. You're probably going to have an artist statement and images. You might not be asked for a budget and a timeline unless it's a larger project. CV and project statement and press, it'll be some combination, but not all of them. So we'll kind of do best practices and drill in each of them. So it looked like maybe we had a room of some confident writers, maybe. Which frankly surprises me, because I feel like for people who choose to express themselves either visually or performatively, that verbally is maybe not the go-to. But I will say that the good news is, whenever I am jurying something, the first thing I do is open the images and look at the images. And then if there's a project statement, I'll read the project statement. If there isn't, I'd read an image list after I read the images, and I would probably look at an artist statement, maybe last or second to last. Some of that's because a lot of them read like, everybody else's, that you could sort of hold up 8 different examples of art, and it could maybe all work for an artist statement. There could be some like generalizations in them, my favorites are when an artist sort of comes through and I can imagine the work from seeing it, or I feel like I get a sense of maybe who that person might be. Did I throw in an example? I think I threw in an example, but that's not until later. Do you want to say anything about it?
Yeah, I mean,
I think we've got a best
practice thing. Yeah. I feel like sometimes I read the artist statement first. Just because I'm praying and hoping that I read something moving, right? And also that I give your work a fair shake. So it's like an opportunity for me, if I'm like a little bit on the edge, or you know, everybody's going to have a different interpretation of your artwork and project a different part of their experience or their understanding of art and art history and the context in which your work fits into that, right? So, yeah, I try and let you speak first before my head speaks first about your art. And then if I'm not really finding that feeling that I'm looking for, I definitely do what Andrew does and look at the artwork. But you know, everybody has their own order. And you know, different institutions are gonna weigh your artist statement, right? But it's really an opportunity for them to begin thinking about how to create a concept and a plan around your work and how to present that to people who might be interested in seeing it once it's up. So it's pretty helpful. And sometimes it needs work.
I only have good examples, but I asked Manik Rajnakar if I could use his artist statement that he applied to Crit Group with. Because there are a few things that I like in it. Like, right out of the gate, I know that there are paintings and drawings. Like, really getting to the point of, like, what is the work? What am I going to see, mostly? And then visual language. So, ideally, I want, like, things like four-headed leopards. Like, I'm not going to forget silver-teeth monkeys. You're getting imagery in it. And it's distinct and standing out, but it's not just visual. It's also what are the inspirations, because I want to know what an artist is looking at and thinking about. You know, what are the ideas in it? Not terribly long. And then going back to some of the sort of best practice things is, you know, Carrie had asked how many people have somebody else help them with an application. I don't ever write anything that the public sees without another set of eyes looking at it. Because I'm writing for an audience. So I need to test that out on an actual audience. So I would say rather than having an artist read your artist statement, have like your smart friend who isn't an artist, who, you know, is gonna have an open mind, but is gonna kind of call you out on like, I don't know what this phrase is that you're using, and you know, most people don't use a word like that. It's like, oh, art speak, you know, you're using some art speak. Somebody who will be honest with you, or maybe somebody who hasn't seen a ton of your work, so they can, you can ask them like, what are you imagining when you're reading this? And then maybe show them something like, is this lining up? Because that's the position that the person who reads it is going to be in. So, you know, bring in somebody else and ask them to take a look at it.
And I guess I would stress the different lengths, preparing an artist statement at different lengths. Yeah, just because one of those is sort of like your elevator pitch, right? Another one of those could be shoplifted and put into a press release that's sent out by an institution. And another one is a jumping off point for art critic or scholar to really start to dig into your work, right? Just as examples, they could be used in different ways, but you know, that's the reason for the varying length, right?
Images?
Yeah, images. So curating artwork is challenging. There are a lot of moving pieces. And if your stuff is not properly labeled, lots of terrible things can happen. Lots of terrible things can happen. Particularly when you start to get to, I mean, one, you should stay organized, right? You should be documenting all the work that you're creating, whether or not you're sending it out, right? And two, things could be mislabeled, right? In game, and it's out on the internet, and it's forever, and it's the wrong name. You know,
Is this best practices if you go with one more?
This one?
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, so typically title, year, and last name, or sometimes first initial and last name. You know, if your last name is Smith, right, you might want to do your first initial or your middle name or something that's going to be unique so we can't get that mixed up.
So like on the receiving side, if you're getting 100 applications and everybody's sending in 5 images and you downloaded a file and it's like IMG 24789 and that gets separated, God forbid, out of your folder, like that's like disorganization on the part of where you sent it to, but you want to prevent that. And then also you can choreograph the way we look. So if you add, you know, the number 1 at the start of that and the number 2 at the start of that, and you have an image list that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're going to look at stuff in the way you want us to look at it. So I like to think of it as like, it's a fashion show, you're going to come out like, bam! Big image, something that you feel like is like really going to catch people's attention. If you do like delicate pencil, small drawings, that is like a great number 3 image. But you want to have the images that maybe need a little bit more time and are a little more subtle. They come maybe towards the middle, and then you end on another, like something someone's going to really remember at the end of it. But you can make us look at things in the way that you want us to, so use that to your advantage.
And I'm going to notice that. I'm going to be like, okay.
Yeah.
You have a plan. Also, JPEG is cool. You know, you want to pay attention to the formats that people are listing, but lossless digital image file formats, even if they're for, you know, even if they're not really print ready, but PNG files, TIFF files, those are preferable because these images could be used on your promotional materials. And those materials could be this small or like as big as this room, right? So that kind of prevents, you know, the back and forth, right? If we already have high-res images of your work done, we don't have to. Yeah.
But don't you usually you're required to put JPEGs in as opposed to things?
Yeah, I mean, you give them what they ask for, right? For me, we can accept a bunch of different file formats.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be picky about, you know, that, but yeah. Just think lossless. You can Google it and get really geeky if you want to, but that's a thing. Quality images, you're all artists. How many of you, raise your flag if any of you have friends who are professional photographers. There is absolutely no reason why you should submit subpar images of your artwork. Barter, trade, you know, make it happen.
Also get creative about where you are photographing your work. Like if we don't know, we don't have a context for your work, if it is propped up against a fence in the backyard because that was, you know, the most space to photograph something, like I'm reading in everything about like environment and public art, and then like none of that's there. That was just like I needed a place to put a big painting. Like I've seen people use this room to photograph their work, and that's a thing you could pay a little money and do that. Or maybe, you know, somebody has a studio and they're going to be out of town, and you're like, can I just use your white wall for, you know, one day, or you're in between hanging in like an artist-run space. See if you can throw them some money so you can do that. But you know, so it looks the most like the context where you're going to be showing it. On the other side, they don't have to use their imagination as much or be distracted by extraneous stuff.
Also, some curators are going to be like, oh my God, there's aggregate all over this artwork. There's no way it's coming in the gallery. Just saying, right? Right? Because if these are spaces that have archives, right, you have to protect archives. So opportunities for critters and all of this other stuff, that could be a thought. You're thinking, I'm just popping this outside for a second because I need the space. They can be like, you know, I don't know what the back of that canvas looks like, you know? Just thinking.
So if it says submit 4 images, don't submit 10. But I'm going to call out Paloma Mayorga. This is an example of one of her submissions. This is one image file. So this is a really great strategy if you have, say, a complex piece where you want to show what a larger installation looks like, and then detail images. Like, you know, this was an application that had 5 images. So she could have submitted 4 images plus 1 other, but instead, by stitching these all as one image, it was a way to look at one piece from a few different views. So I don't think that's cheating, I think that's smart. Anything else about put on that? All right. Your resume and your CV.
Right.
I'm surprised that this is a thing, but make sure your contact information is on it, because sometimes it doesn't have a phone number or an email. We want to be able to reach you when we're really excited about what we saw. That seems obvious, but sometimes that happens.
Yeah, and so your artist resume and your CV could be one and the same, or they could be 2 separate documents, right? And if they ask you for an artist resume and then a CV, give them 2 documents, right? So the artist resume is going to have, you know, it could be your professional experience, right? What you do during the day, if you're, you know, those professional experiences in the art world, right? Whether or not you're speaking on panels or working in an institution as a preparator or artist curator or something like that. That's the kind of information we want to know, because we want to know we want to get a sense of who you fully are, right? As an artist, and sometimes I get information, I'm like, oh, they would definitely be comfortable doing an artist talk, okay, great, you know, because we see that sort of like experience.
We heard a couple of people who said they were in collective, so you might want to think about, do you have a statement as a collective, a statement as an individual artist, and some kind of combination of the two, because there are some situations where you might want to be presenting yourself, showing that you have that ability to work in different ways. It's going to grow. I would also say there's a point at which every single thing doesn't need to be on it. So as you know, it shouldn't be more than a couple pages. So then you can start being a little more like the coffee shops go away, East might go away, and you're just looking at things that you were invited to do. But at the start, you're going to put everything on there until it's getting too long, and then you'll start editing.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, depending upon where you're applying to, you know, Austin is a small town, but pretends to be a city. And so, like, we know people that are curating, we know, okay, if you're doing this thing, you do it annually, it's not a competitive process, it just says, okay, to show it, right? So, take those things off for big deals. It's okay. You got it.
Yeah. Is it just a list of everything, or is there like typically a small description, or?
Right, so the question is it a list, or I think you could organize that where if you had solo exhibitions, you might lead with those, and then have group exhibitions.
But does it say like medium and, you know, like a description of what it was, or just like?
Yeah, so so it's the title of the show, right? The venue, the city that it was in, date.
Not like.
If there was a juror or curator that is impressive that picked your work for it, you would put, you know, curated by or curated by. Yeah.
And then some people will put an asterisk next to those different shows if they curated it, and also, you know, show their work in that space. So there's a way to distinguish that. You know, it just needs to be easy to assess, right? Like it's, you know, format. Yeah. We're getting into the Q&A. Listen, emphasis. Yes.
If you had another career and you're also do art, to what extent do you incorporate both or not?
Is it related, and does it inform your art practice?
I would say in my case, yes. In terms of content and getting inspiration from other work.
Great. I think I would be most interested in hearing you speak in your bio about how they inform one another or why you made that shift. and how it informs your work, but I wouldn't expect to see professional experience that is non-art related on your art CV.
So, I have a question. Like, I've never been in a gallery or done any work like that, but I have a lot of work that's out in the public. Never done any public art, but it's for businesses. And I love art in Austin. How do you translate that into a CV?
You like they're in collections? Like in a corporate collection?
No,
or
it's
in
like,
a coffee shop or
like for
restaurant?
Amy's Ice Cream, or
Yeah.
House for
Yeah.
Amy's Ice Cream, or I've done a lot of work for Peter Pan. I've done a lot of big stuff, but that's all I've done.
Yeah, so we
So-
commissioned work.
Yes,
Right.
I've only done commissioned work.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's perfect.
so now you're
Anything
getting
else?
commission work.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay. So I got a question. Do you look at that differently than people who've only have done gallery shows or museum shows, and it's on that direction?
I think for as many people as there are in the world, there are that many art worlds. So
Okay.
it's about finding the art world that you want to be in, and then finding the path to get into that art world and find those people. But there's like
Okay.
a million ways to do this right.
Okay. I'm just curious because
Yeah.
I'm always confused by that. So.
I have sitting on the table a great book. So if you're like, what does a CV really look like? This book, which will come up on the last slide, like has tons of great examples of all kinds of things. Like, you know, I printed out some sample budgets if like somebody wants to see one of those or something like that. But it's a good resource. Getting your shit together, it's called.
All right. So, your proposal statement. So if I've seen your work, because you've submitted it over and over again to different open calls, right? This is the opportunity for you to distinguish yourself, right? And explain specifically what is going to be a part of the body of work that you want to exhibit. It's not a reiteration of your artist statement or your bio, right? You really want to speak specifically to the work, the materials, the process, and why it's important. Can you talk a little bit about audience? Because I feel like
You mean who's?
yeah. Because I guess you know, I think in the audience piece, right? That's the opportunity to convince an institution or a gallery that you fit within the mission, vision, and values of that institution, right? That's one way of looking at it, but also.
And I think a lot of the challenge of the proposal is about thinking about on the other side, how someone is going to experience it. So you're essentially imagining something that doesn't exist because you're hoping for the opportunity to make that. So if you have some conversations that you want the audience to have, this is the perfect time to be like raising questions without having answers to those things. If there's a certain audience experience that you are hoping for, or an environment that you want to create, or a way that you want the public to interact with that, include it. Not all work has that experience, so you might not need to do that for, say, a painting show, for example. But if there's a specific audience in mind and you know that this opportunity is going to help you reach them, that's how you can kind of customize that too. And at this point, we all know that you are making it up, and that is okay. It's about painting a believable, compelling, sort of aspirational, well thought out, like you've researched and planned to the best of your ability, but everybody knows like you haven't gotten the money, you haven't gotten the opportunity, things are gonna change, like it might not be 15 of something, it might be 12 of something, and it might not be 10 feet tall, it might be 8 feet tall. Like, don't worry about lying, that's not lying. That we all know that stuff's gonna change. Just like say it with conviction.
Yes, yes, whatever you do, do it with conviction. Also, I think audience, and maybe this is more of like a tone too, we're talking about the other side of the proposal, so you kind of want to think about the institution that you're submitting your proposal to, right? A cultural center may or may not have a slightly more relaxed expectation around the kinds of language that you use. It might in fact be looking for accessible language, right? And language that is specific, detailed, but also very clear, right? So at the museum where I work at, we have a rule that sometimes gets broken, but we try not to write exhibition text that is like above a 6th or 7th grade reading level, right? Because for us, you know, our goal is to bring people in that are not just regular patrons of museums and galleries, but people that are there because, you know, there's a slip and slide going on the Freedom Line, and my kids get free popsicles on Sunday, right? Right, and then they might stumble into gallery. Oh, this is cool, right? And it's also language that helps parents, right, explain to their children what they're looking at, or gives them some context for that, right? And that is really like a museum standard best practice. You know, obviously we have language that's like up here, and sometimes I have to sit with my phone and I'll be like, sartorial, couldn't you just say textile? Like what, you know, like, and sometimes I catch myself writing like that too, right? But those are some of the things that I think you want to consider, right?
So the Tito's Prize happens during East. So if you have been here during East, you know that there are a lot of people who it's like the main time of year that they go and see art. It isn't representative of the entire year. So, you know, that's a thing to consider, the timing of that. Do we have some best practices on this stuff?
Next question.
Oh, there's a question.
Yeah,
Any
yeah.
questions in the middle as we go? Or?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
So this is like specifically geared towards public art. Can you speak to the different trajectory between, I'm an artist with like a super discernible style, and I want to do my thing in this specific place, versus an artist like myself who is more interested in addressing a specific issue where the outcome of the work is totally dependent upon community engagement and the site and all of those things, where the historical aspect of my work looks different because I'm interested in dealing with a specific situation and responding to that, versus I have a discernible style. In speaking about that, I often say it's more important to me to engage with the community and the stakeholders to figure out what the work wants to be versus my own personal bias that I'm trying to promote, or like a style.
So if I was looking at your proposal, I would assume that your images would look quite different. So you might be like, embrace that. You don't need to be showing like that you have a style.
Right.
And then I would be looking for demonstrated success doing outreach. So that could, and also your plan for how you're gonna do it on the next project. And it might be nice to have like some community quotes or some, you know, from people you have worked with.
Inside of the statement?
No, not inside of the statement. Where would that, in a larger proposal? Yeah, I guess that would be if it's a longer statement.
Yeah.
So if it's like a
on a
500
past
word,
project.
Right.
yeah, but so that's the thing, is like, where does that go? Is that a photo, or is that, like, do I show people in the photo, which maybe isn't the sexiest photo of the work, but it's
Yes.
showing that
Yeah.
people are engaging with the thing?
Yes.
Or do I want the sexy photo that's at night with like really high contrast? And then in a 500 word statement, when I'm really trying to make every word count, do I throw a quote in that's like, kind of feels like a non sequitur, or I'm really
Forget I
trying to
said
like,
quote. You're not putting a quote in.
no quote.
Yes, there should be people, and yes, you should have a strategy for how you're going to involve them in the next project.
The only place that I feel like I see that having some sort of benefit is if you yourself, the artist, and you should all do this, put your own sort of press kit together. That's a place where you could see a point.
But where does that have a place in a proposal?
So like the Tito's last year had an attachment. It never told you what it was. It just said like you could put an attachment.
So that's a unique moment. That's not often the case for proposals. So like if I had a press kit, maybe I get a panelist to look at my website and they're like, oh, there's a press kit download, cool.
Yeah.
And that's a treasure trove. But like if I'm doing like 5 images and a 500-word statement, and I'm most interested in community engagement, and that is what dictates the work. That's the rub. That's like where I'm not sure what to promote.
Well, I think one of the places where you could put that, if your work has been reviewed, for example, so if there are hyperlinks to articles that have been written about the work, that you've done, I might put them in there. That's something, like on a CD, you can have a section for press, and that would be a place where, people can learn more about what the impact of your work is, right? Because you're talking about doing site-specific interventions, right, that are around like a particular geography or community, right? Right, so that's where I would opt to slide that in. And then also the artist that you showed a sample of earlier, it says, artist proposal, you can add some pages, right? You follow the directions, you just have a little extra underneath. It's a calculated risk, but usually if you followed all of the other directions and there are a couple of extra pages, nobody's gonna be like, this is,
Yeah, let's see what else.
Artist biography.
Sometimes you're doing this and a statement. You're not always necessarily doing this. But this is maybe a little more personal, your background, the things that have shaped you and informed you. Like we talked about sort of that career change. That's an example where that might come in. But yeah, something that's more personal than what we're going to get just from looking at the shows that you have been in or where you went to school. And getting a little sense of personality through it as well.
I'm very interested in all of the sort of constellation of experiences that got you to this point where you're making this kind of art. I'm deeply interested in it as somebody that curates, right? So this is really the who are your people, where you come from kind of opportunity, right? And how does that, you get to talk a little bit about your art practice in your bio, right? Because you're kind of sharing how those things inform the kind of work that you're doing and that you're interested in, right? And I do notice artist bios that are really vague, right? Vague, yeah. I'm like, do you ever have a conversation with somebody and you talk for 20 or 30 minutes and you realize that you actually don't know anything about them? Those kind of artist bios, right?
Where do you feel in a bio, where do you feel like there's room for stuff that maybe doesn't directly relate to your artwork at all, or not directly, but like certain experiences that you've had? Like, is that relevant, do you feel like? Like, for example, I'm a photographer, but I used to work wrangling horses. Like, that has nothing to do with my photography, but I think it informs some of the work that I create, like, tangentially. Are you like, that's cool, or are you just like, this is useless information that I don't necessarily care about?
I mean, I think it's up to you to sort of like connect those two dots for us, but I'm gonna be like, if I'm looking at your bio, I'm gonna be like the photographer, horse wrangler. Cool.
Right. Definitely gonna remember it.
Right.
Right. That doesn't mean you have to photograph horses, but if it informs the way that you think about things, or the way you see the world, or the way you like relate to living things, like, yeah, that's completely valid. Yeah. Alright. Now we're going to talk about budgets.
Yeah.
I mean, so again, for a proposal, this is, you you are showing that you have done some research. So we're looking for, have you thought through what it's going to take to pull this project off? And have a basic sense of some pricing of things. Like, we know that some things are unknown at this point, but it gives us a sense of how much thought you put into something. And on the other side of the table, especially if we are spending like somebody else's money, then there is this, we need to make sure that there is, that's like, not a risk involved, that like someone's really ready, that if they're given an opportunity that they are going to succeed. So we want to make sure that that they have a good gauge on prices. If somebody's able to get in-kind things that are going to help offset the budget, or if they raise money from somewhere else, like that, really, there's some faith that comes in from that. I like to see an artist who's put a fee, because I frankly worry if it's an impressive budget and the artist is not getting paid in that like, that's going to be a bad experience for the artist, and it makes me think that, that they just haven't fully thought through that, because I feel like artists should get paid, so they should advocate for themselves in that way. So, it shouldn't be the bulk of the budget, but I would expect that to be listed there. And then you also might be thoughtful about if there is, that there's a range of money that's available, that you are applying for a project, that you're coming in with a proposal that is maybe not at the very top, unless you have a really ambitious project and like that is everything that's going to need to take it, but you shouldn't be padding a budget just to like get to that number to hit that max. And likewise, it shouldn't be like, don't undercut yourself because you're worried about asking for money. That might actually go against you and it look like you haven't really thought things through. So, be confident and ask for what you know it's going to take to do this.
So I have a question about budgeting. When you stumble upon the unfortunate circumstance of working with somebody that has commissioned you and you ask and they tell you they have no budget, how do you kind of sway them in the direction to kind of propose to them that they give you a number to kind of more or less kind of gauge on yourself as to what you can do with the resources that you give it?
The first question should be, what is the budget, not do you have a budget? Because it sets the expectation that there should be a budget. I would ask them how much they have before you tell them what you want, because you're in a position of negotiating once they've said something. But if they told you they don't have anything, then I would be either thinking about why you should say yes to it. And what can they offer you if they can't offer money? Do they have access to some other resource, whether it is equipment, expertise, could you get like a printed piece out of it? But you're totally well within your right to not expect to work for free.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately sometimes we have to sort of combat this idea that artists shouldn't be paid, right?
My conversations about budget, for the most part, are usually conversations, meaning it's like a two-sided conversation, and it has been rare where somebody has said, you know, like, okay, well, you know, let's talk about budget, and they want X and I have Y, and then that's the end of the conversation. Like, you know, usually, ideally, there's some back and forth, and you try to find a place that feels like you're getting what you need out of that. And I think institutions, when they can, are going to, they're going to try to work with you. It's not going to be like because you asked that, they aren't going to want to work with you.
So if you're looking to put a budget together for get funding or grant money for putting on an exhibition, and the exhibition space maybe gives you like a discounted rate or donates that space to you, does that count as like in-kind for the budget? And it's sort of helpful to the artists to like donations in kind for.
Because that shows your resourcefulness and that you can hustle and that you are good at managing money. So all of those ways where it's like if you get supplies that are donated, you know, list those kinds of things, because if you're going to someone and seek funding, then that instills confidence that you can pull off something ambitious within means.
What do you,
horse wrangler. See? People remember it.
What do you feel like is usual for photography equipment, where it's like, you know, like paints and paintbrushes, like you can have a very tangible amount of money, but if I'm saying like, I'm not going to charge you for the cost of using my own equipment, which obviously I wouldn't, but would you put that in the budget as like something?
So, you know, if you're doing a project that has specific specs, right? And I think there's this misnomer that like, so photography is inexpensive because so many people can put things out of, you know, boom, photograph, right? So one of the things to think about is like what might be the standard rental rate of like specialized equipment or something like that. That's something that I feel like I see in the budget, and I think that that's absolutely appropriate. But you figure that out, you know, in terms of you know, supplies. You know, you consider that supplies. And it's calculated in your artist fee. I'm sorry, I have a Charlie horse right now. I don't know why.
Do you need some water?
I guess,
And printing costs and framing costs, I expect that.
I guess I'm more, so I would never like expect that some of the money would go to paying me the rental rate of my equipment, but would that be something that you could include as like an in-kind service? I'm kind of.
I would think you would have an artist fee, and that would be that would go towards
Yeah, I'll include that.
I disagree with that.
Okay. Maybe Nick and I need to talk about that, but that does bring up the question when you're asking for funding. Can you pay yourself for things that you have skills with, such as photography, documentation, videography, that sort of thing, beyond just the art statement? Might go to some people who have had a career in one area and now they're a fine artist, but they've got skills that they can utilize on their own behalf. Can you pay yourself for that?
Right, so are you saying, again, understanding
Like
it's
graphic design and photography type
right.
stuff.
So you're designing, you know, say you apply to city, you know, community initiatives grant, right? So you're paying yourself an artist fee, then you're paying yourself to design the flyer, and then you're paying yourself to photograph the work, right? And those things are kind of-
I guess my question is, and probably what Nick would say is, where does that go too far, and what is a good balance of being resourceful and using your skills, but then also seeming like you're just paying yourself, but if you have those legitimate skills?
I would think it would be a minority, not a majority of the budget. I don't know that I have a percentage that I could be more precise on that. It would raise a red flag if you were identified for all of those things for me.
Sure.
For design and for documentation. I would expect to see all of them listed. And if you said that you had in-kind support for some of them, that seems appropriate. Even if you're the one doing them, that would be okay. But if you were getting a fee to do all of those that's coming out of the budget, that would look odd. Can you walk that off?
Maybe.
A place to look for budget information is wage. And this is hard to read. It's just like a screenshot of what this website looks like. But what's cool about it is all nonprofit organizations have to file what their budgets are. So you can see that the Contemporary Austin has a $6.5 million budget each year because that's public information. So they have examples on the top bar and it's institutions. And so it gives you a sense of like the kind of institution, and they move from like small to MoMA. Or the Met, and it has a number associated with. So if you're working with an organization and you know their budget, because you can look that up, then you could find something comparable. And then it'll tell you what you should be paid if you have a solo show, if you are doing a performance, if they're borrowing a video, and this is created by artists. But it's a standard that institutions use. We look at it at the museum. They also do like certification. Like some organizations are wage certified, but it can kind of give you a ballpark of because it isn't reasonable to expect that like a community center is going to pay the same as the Met. So you considering who you're working with, that will be different, and this is a sliding scale.
And is that an acronym, wage?
Yeah, it's wait. No, I'm not going to go that far. It's like working. Yeah, we're going to save it at the end. It's going to be real exciting. Reveal the acronym for this organization on our last slide.
It was there. It was
working hard.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, everybody should look at this website. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and then your fee unfortunately is usually a smidge of what it actually costs an institution to put on your show, right? So that's also something to consider, right? And that's going to vary based on how complex your medium and sort of like what the requirements are of your work to be safely exhibited and properly exhibited. But yeah. And it's cool because it's not just for the exhibition, it's for like a panel discussion, right? If you're also a visual and performing artist, what the institution should pay you for that work. Because, okay, you've done your art, but you're providing other services, right? So, okay.
Question in front.
Can you explain more what in-kind services are?
So it's things that are like donated, that you've gotten for free. So it could be if you are getting materials from somewhere for free, you can list the value of those. So it shows that there are, or if you have, someone who's photographing your work and you're doing some kind of trade with them, but you know what the value of that would be, you could list that as an in-kind service. So it shows that like, this could be a project that is $20,000, but you have $5,000 of in-kind to offset that, so you're going to pull it off for $15,000.
Okay, cool, thank you.
And again, it's about on the other side of that, like instilling that confidence that you have a thorough grasp of the budget and that you have resources and the confidence to go out and be pulling things together. So it just makes a jury feel. Like
more
you've been
secure.
Yeah, so press links, we touched on that briefly. Screenshots and snippets of those things are best because the internet is actually not always forever. Only when it counts. So there's that. And then timelines are another thing that I'm like, okay, they have a clear understanding of how long it's going to take them to get to point A to point B. I might not end up in a ball underneath my desk 2 days before your show. Okay, good. Yes?
I have a question about that one too. Feedback I got on one of my proposals, it wasn't having to do with the timeline of creating the artwork, but they thought because I was doing an installation piece, and I said that I would need 2 to 3 days to install the piece, they wanted a timeline for those 2 to 3 days. How detailed do you need to be for something like that? And
That
what
seems
is
excessive.
that seems, I've never been asked that in any show I've
Right.
done. And I was surprised that that was the feedback. They were,
That sounds like someone who's inexperienced with
with installation?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So for me, that would be, if I was you, I would think that's a red flag, and they might not be able to support me through this process because they don't understand how it works.
Okay.
Which would mean you might need to hold their hand through it, and you might need to be asking for things that you would otherwise be provided normally.
Yeah, because it didn't really have to do with the, I mean, I understand where you're talking about timeline here, is that if I'm proposing a specific project, you want to see a timeline of completion, concept, all
Right,
that.
there's fabrication.
Not for the last 2 to 3
there's
days.
Installation,
Yeah.
there's promotion, right, there's
Okay.
documentation, yeah.
If I may come into what you just said, I think if they ask that between 2 days to install the way, maybe what they're asking is how many hours
Yeah.
in between that 2 days
Right.
it take care to install the way.
Yes.
From my own experience, that is what will come up. Because sometimes they will say, okay, I decide I want to work throughout the night. They'll say,
Right.
no, you can't, we close between 10 p.m. so you can't go above that. So maybe that's the question that they're
Right.
trying to find out.
Yeah, so maybe they worked with someone and their install crew was doing 14-hour days, and they're like, whoa, we don't want to do that again. So when she says 2 days, does she mean 16 hours?
Yeah,
Or does she
and
mean
that's
24
fair.
hours?
I think I was kind of specific about depending on the venue's open hours. I was prepared to work within their open public hours. That's why I gave the 2 to 3 days. But they wanted something much more detailed than that.
Yeah, I mean,
Or maybe assurances that it was only going to be 3 8-hour days. I don't know.
Were they assisting you and they were trying to find out what kind of labor you would need when?
They did ask if I would need assistance, and I said no. I did address that and addressed equipment that I would need from them also. So I was kind of surprised that they asked for, that was their feedback. You didn't give us a timeline. And that seemed to be important.
yeah, I mean, the only thing I could think about is if you have like a gallery elevation or layout and the walls are numbered or have letters, you know, hit them with something simple to see if you've answered their question. So you'd be like, wall A is going to be done day 1, wall B is going to be done day 2, and wall C is going to be done day 3 between this hour and that hour. And
Yeah.
right?
Just brief and kind of overview. Yeah, okay.
Oh, I didn't finish this. It was institutional. Sorry, this is incomplete. So there's your timeline as a creative being, and then there's an institutional timeline, right? And these things have to meet up, but you're not really even on this. You're here, but your work is over here. But this is important. It's important to understand this, because if everything isn't in place, you could just be decorating some walls in a space, right? You need to allot enough time to not just complete your work, but to make sure that the institution that you're working with can properly support you, right? And market you, because the game is to leverage this into a larger market, into a bigger opportunity, right? That's ultimately going to get you into whatever little nook you're trying to get into, right? So yeah, I put some general things on here around like timelines, but I would say for my institution, and every institution is going to be different. It just depends on what kind of museum or gallery professionals you're working with. Generally speaking, museums are going to be a lot more strict than commercial galleries, right? They want the artwork a month or 2 in advance of your show, but you're an artist. You know when your show goes up, why does Mar have to be here 2 months before? You know, you want to keep playing with it and work on it, and you know, that's less of an option the larger sort of the institutions become, right? And you know, installations, I think for, you know, medium-sized to small galleries, you know, can take 1 to 2 weeks. Anything less than that, this is a pop-up, right? and it can take 1 to 2 months, depending upon how complex it is and the considerations of the the gallery schedule and the kind of help that they need to bring in to set their work up, right? Let's see. I think that's all I'm going to cover. We can, you know, if we have a little time for Q&A, we can get into that. Yeah, for me, exhibitions, we start planning those 12 months, sometimes 24 months out, right? So, I'll leave that at that, right? All right. So, do we even want to do this?
I feel like we should jump to like the other shit to consider.
Okay. All right.
Do you want to do any call outs on like, we've got two proposal examples, just maybe things that stood out?
So, Phone Home, a Ziga visual installation by Jessica Dolores was at the museum in 2007. Jess, I knew her professionally. We were part of the same arts organization, which is a Southern-based arts organization that is arts and justice based. So I knew Jess. She sent me a unsolicited proposal. And here's a kind of an excerpt of what she said. So, Phone Home it was an interactive mixed media installation, and she, in her proposal, she talked about Phone Home being connected to a body of thought, Afro-cosmology, right? And doing an exhibition that sort of was about providing people with strategies for survival. It's pretty cool. She was like, we're gonna do this with these interactive phone booths that I'm gonna bring. And she got vintage phones from all over the country and like brought them into the space. And they said things to you when you picked them up. And people would just, I would walk into the gallery, you know, periodically people would just be standing there listening to a phone, smiling, laughing, crying, right?
So she has like 4 questions in her proposal also. So almost a third of this are not statements, but questions, which I think, again, it's like, it's what she's thinking about and what she wants to explore, but she's, you know, she hasn't figured it out yet.
Right.
That's great.
Right. Where do we find home in our bodies, our communities, and the world? Where do we find home in our collective memory, our relationship to the earth, in our imagination of our future? How do we communicate with the space using metaphysical, spiritual, scientific, communal, and artistic practices? Right, and then she tells me, all right, this is how we're gonna do this. And she sent me a Google SketchUp schematic.
Of your space?
Of my space. Of my space. That she's never been to. Okay? Yep. Okay. Okay.
So I'll real quick talk about, so Steve Parker, I was on the jury, there were 3 of us who picked the Tito's Prize last year, and a couple of things stood out from his proposal. One was he included research images, so these were not, you know, he hadn't made the work yet. This was, it showed what he was thinking about, looking at, they were really compelling, interesting images anyway. But it let me know, you know, what was going on in his head. Also, Google SketchUp, which helps imagine, like he really thought about what he wanted, what work he wanted to make and where he wanted it to go. And it was pretty accurate.
Yeah.
That's the show. Yeah, that's the show. That's the Google SketchUp. Can you sneak back up on her?
See?
There's like, I don't know. All right. Oh, no, we're second at time.
Yeah.
What do you think the impact is when he presented that extra information to you, as opposed to just, let's say he had just shown you JPEGs of finished work, do with this, do that?
Well, that meant he was making work specifically for the exhibition. And there was, it didn't say upload your layout for the exhibition. There was the opportunity to include an attachment, right? And it did not say what that attachment might be. So I think like he saw that as an opportunity because he was really thinking about, here's the space, here's what I want to make for the space, here's how I want these things to relate, here's how I want people to move through the space because it's interactive. So, you know, to our question about working with community, like that is an opportunity outside of the 500-word proposal statement to talk about, you know, here's my strategy for how I would work with community, here's how I would evaluate if it was successful, here's how I've done that in the past, here's some quotes from people that speak to the success of that. I mean, you could use that for a variety of things that speak to your proposal, but if you get to include an attachment, be thoughtful about what's the thing that is going to round out what you are proposing. I thought that was smart. We want to remind you that it's okay to get paid.
Yeah, and once again, right, art is a business. We're going to play you this nice TED Talk, but you can just look it up.
Yes. It's in our resources at the end.
Yeah, I think for me this is just a reiteration of sort of making a proposal stand out, which is really convincing people that you are the right artist for that space at this moment. That's another layer, right? In addition to all of the things that are sort of at play, right? Even if you're sending a little email correspondence follow-up, you're acknowledging some of the work that they've been doing and you're saying, hey, I want to continue with this momentum. You know, here's how this exhibition sort of fits into the ways that you've been curating the space over, you know, a period of time. Those little notes, it's like you have an interview and you send a thank you card afterwards. Old school, but sometimes pretty effective.
So doing all this application and submitting proposals takes a lot of time. So if you are customizing things, sometimes that's going to be easier than other times. And that also might be a time where you check in and are realizing if it is hard, then maybe that isn't the best use of your time compared to those times where, you know, you maybe rather be in your studio doing something. Other times it might be when you're customizing, it's a little better fit, and so you have a sense of, you know, I got a good shot at this, and so it's a good use of my time. So, you know, for those things that are, you know, there's unsolicited, you know, like I said, that's a longer shot. So be strategic about how you're using it.
Yeah, and I guess I think you also kind of want to try and assess how good of a, you know, how easy it will be to work with a particular institution, right? How much say are you going to have about how your work is presented or what's written about your work or the way that people experience your work? You know, for some people they're like, I just want to show, it doesn't matter, right? But it might matter later, right?
And if you're on the receiving end of it, you want to know that somebody understands your program and why you show the artists that you show and why, you know, showing them together the statement that you're trying to make and how somebody thinks that they, not only do they recognize that, but they think that they bring something to that and fit into it. You know, that for an institution feels better when you know that somebody's done their research and recognizes why they're applying to you in particular. Other stuff? So sometimes there might be, you can imagine that there would be questions or like there's something that maybe you know is, you know, like maybe it's a gap in your CV or like a shift professionally or something in your proposal that is going to be hard that like you maybe haven't figured that out. I have the strategy that like, if you know it and the jury is pretty smart, they're probably going to figure it out, that it's better to just speak to that and you frame that conversation and you address some of those questions rather than let the jury worry that you don't know it yourself. So I think that's, you know, and it just, again, you're eliminating any kind of doubt on their end of things. I already talked about you can fake it. We all know that that's, yeah.
So in other words, the Tuba, I forgot, Steve Parker, was not only the work you responded to, but he gave you an absolute security that a secure feeling that he could produce this show professionally and his follow through.
I mean, yes and no. He also isn't a sculptor. You know, he was first and foremost known as a musician. So I think there was a leap of faith in commissioning that work on the one hand, because it was a new path that he was working in, but that was interesting. It was during East, and he was doing a project that had, it was accessible and had community engagement and interactivity, and we thought that would be a good fit for that. And you know, it's for an Austin artist, and you know, one of the things, to be like perfectly frank about what happens, you know, on a committee, is we looked at a lot of really strong artist work who were like a year out of grad school or about to finish grad school. And this is a prize that is for an Austin artist, and you know, that's a pretty, not only is that a time where artists still have the resources of a university, but it's also a transitional time. So there is no guarantee that those people are then going to be invested in the community. Whereas an artist like Steve Parker not only has invested in this community, but is a strong collaborator and worked with lots of different artists that he brings into his project, and did bring other artists into his project there. And I'm not saying like do a project like Steve did. That's a bad strategy. Everybody should be doing, you know, a project that makes sense for them. But I think what a layout does, or what a sketch does, or what a well-written statement does, or a budget, is just so that there's been thought put into it.
I think you also said something important about Steve. Is people knew Steve, right? Big city, small town. You know, that's important. Relationships power everything. An artist proposal is a job application. People don't work with people they don't like unless their stuff is really, really good. Really good. Really good. You know, but we do do it. But we do do it. But we do it, right? And so that's a big thing, right? One of the things that, you know, I consider, and something that we talked about, is, you know, I'm curious about how artists are interacting with everybody at the institution that I work with. I don't care if the person answers the phone. If you're rude to one of my colleagues, we're gonna have a problem. We're gonna have a conversation. I actually ask my assistant for, so I mean, there's a bullet point. I say, like, you can ask questions. You know, assuming you've read all of the instructions, like, sometimes things are not clear. Sometimes people are working in a way that, you know, the call is written to 2D and you're working in performance or video. So I think absolutely there's people on the other side of this. So, you know, reach out and ask a question. But I do also ask my assistant how people treat her in that process, because I think that that is also telling. Because I'm running a program that is about building a community, and I want to get a sense of you know, how people just treat everybody. So do be nice. And also look for feedback. You know, it was great to hear when we were going around the room at the start, somebody had said, I got feedback on something that I didn't get. If you have that opportunity, I think, you know, take it and learn from those experiences. If you spent all that work on it, you should at least get something out of that. And
I have a question. It's about making a leap. So you either see a proposal that kind of, you could see what you've been doing maybe little and over here, but you could see what you're doing could go into this big format. Or you could take, that's one way of doing it, or taking what you've already been doing and then translating it into this other format. What is a way to project yourself that, yeah, you can do this, it's right in line with where you can see your work going?
I mean, visually you can mock things up. I think it's also about finding when the right fit. So ideally you're applying for opportunities where that is what they want to do. You know, that maybe isn't, if it's like, you know, a corporate commission, like they might not be ready to take that kind of leap with you, so that might not be the best fit. But if you're finding an organization where they support the growth of artists, like then you're applying specifically for opportunities where you've seen that they have done that in the past, where, you know, artists have grown and changed.
It's 8 right now, so I just want to honor everybody's time.
Yes.
I don't know if y'all have any more things to say, but I just want to wrap up and y'all can, any final
Yeah,
words?
we can share the presentation if you want the presentation. There's some examples of budgets if you want to take one of those.
So make sure you sign up on the email list so we can share the presentation. I think the note that you said about the Tito's Prize, for those of you that expressed you were interested in the Tito's Prize, is a great note. There is a note specifically, it says additional documents, you can put press, but it says specifically proposal. So if you're thinking about the exhibition, put it in there.
And tomorrow's the deadline.
Yes, I think most of it, but if you haven't thought about it, you should apply. You could win $50,000. And it's a look. Well, thank y'all so much.
Thank you for all the great questions.